So yeah, the idea of the grace space was birthed nearly 2 years ago, as I said, sitting having coffee with a fellow mum, and we both were new mums who had managed to get out of the house for a couple of hours one Saturday, and we just sat there talking, and in the end we were like, we need to go, like it's been like nearly 2 hours, and we just sat there just chatting. But I kind of walked away from that feeling like, yeah, that it just chatting helped me to process some of the stuff that was swirling around in my head, made me feel a little bit more human, just having a moment for myself. And yeah, I just kind of walked away feeling like, oh, I'm not alone in this. So yeah, I was determined to create a space for mothers to come just as they are, with their mum buns and their baby spew or whatever it might be, and just bask in the glorious chaos of motherhood. So yeah, I realised through my short 3 years of doing this mum thing that there's many different ways of doing it. And you only have to go as far as just scrolling on Instagram to realise that, yeah, there's no right or wrong way to do this. Like, there's a whole lot of information out there, and that was probably one of the most overwhelming things for me when I first had this little baby in my arms, was like, far out, like there's no manual, and I don't actually even know how I want to do this yet. And so there's kind of that journey of navigating who you are as a mum. Yeah, so I just kind of felt like this space had to be a place of grace, where there were no right or wrong ways to do it, just a bunch of mums on a journey. So you might have seen in my email that you may or may not have got when I first kind of introduced this idea this year, and I just want to read this to you again because I think it's important. So this had to be a space for the modern day mum, the stay-at-home mum, the homeschooling, the working, the daycare mum, the bottle feeding, breastfeeding, my children only eat McDonald's mum, the sleep trainer, the co-sleeper, haven't had sleep in years mum, the routine, the casual, and the not even sure what I'm doing mum, the first time, the second time, the 5 p.m. wine time mum. Anyone? The woman who has miscarried and not even sure if she can call herself mum, the single, the co-parenting, the resenting her husband mum, the researcher, the Switzerland, the ignorance is bliss mum, the stretch marked, the bounce back, the whose body even is this mum, the helicopter, the give it a go but don't go too far mum, and for all the mums in between. So yeah, my prayer for us all is that we would leave here feeling like our tanks are a little bit fuller, that we have a bit more grace for each other, and yeah, that we're not alone. So we're the Finlay girls, aren't we?
We are. We married the boys just so we could be together.
Yeah,
we do love you, Nathan, but we love each other more.
Yeah, pretty much. I was actually thinking of how to explain you and your personality, and something came into mind when I was about, I had just got married. I married Nathan when I was 18, and I was about 19, and I remember sitting in the car with you, and you were sharing your birth story to me, one of the girls. Yep. And you explained to me that once the baby comes out, that's not the end of it. There's still the placenta and stitches if you need to and all that kind of jazz. And I just remember being absolutely shocked, horror. In the movies, when the baby comes out, they cuddle it and that's the end. All the bad stuff's over.
Yep.
And you proceeded to tell me about the placenta and whatnot. Yep. And I was so I thought that was a good story to explain just how straight up you are and that you don't hold anything back.
Oh yeah, there's no boundaries with me, so I apologise in advance if I offend anybody. But the placenta was literally the worst pain. Give me birth any day. That placenta and the contractions that came with that thing, I'm giving birth to a twin. It felt like a twin. It was horrific. Yeah, no more.
And yet, both of my births, my midwife said, can you just do a little cough for me? And I'm holding the baby, feeding. She goes, yeah, just do a little cough. And I was like, and placenta.
Oh, well, there you go.
So don't believe everything you hear, guys. It didn't put me off anyway. Right, let me find my message because I've got some questions on here. So tell us about you, actually. I'm going to chuck a photo up here of us and our lovely girls because we are girl moms.
Yep.
Where's my man? Oh, he's coming.
It's not the most glamorous photo.
Oh, no, this one's good. This one's a good one.
Yeah, no, it's not, but that's okay. I'm a stylist. What is my child wearing? Pajamas, sneakers, and a hoodie. Okay. So that's us with our husbands. As you can see, we married very well.
And, I don't know about money. They don't have much money.
No.
But they do love us.
We didn't get the rich brother. We got the good-looking, loving brothers. So we're happy with that. So there is a baby missing. So obviously little Flo's missing from that picture. But that's me and my husband and my 3 daughters. Yeah.
Tell us their names, because I love their names.
So Elena is now 13 and a half. That's my eldest. My middle one is Imogen, so she'll be 12 in April. She was my Easter Sunday baby. In fact, Mrs. Ganley taught her in year 1. I'm so sorry I unleashed her on you. And then my baby is 7, my newborn. She is a 7-year-old newborn. I'm obsessed. There's something about that last baby, I tell you. She's just my universe. I love them all the same, but differently. I know you mums of more than one child get that. So yeah, that's them.
That's cool. So yeah, I rocked up on the scene and married Nathan, and you and Mark had already been married for quite a few years, and you had Elena, and then shortly after we got married, you had Imogen. And so that was 2 under 2.
Yeah, I had a 19-month gap, and that was planned. What the hell was I thinking? To be fair though, I felt that a small gap was quite good because you're in the baby mode, you're doing the nappies, you're doing the sleeps and the naps and all of that thing, and I'm home. I wasn't working at that time. So our first daughter, we had her after 4 years of marriage, and it didn't happen planned. I know it's weird to say that, but it happened a bit sooner than what we wanted. So that was a bit of a shock to the system. We'd just come back from Europe. We hadn't bought a house, and that was a big thing for me, was to have that security of a home, especially living in Auckland, and rent is really expensive. In that time that I found out I was pregnant, my husband had been made redundant the first time, and I wasn't working because we'd just come back from 3 months in Europe, and then we find out that I'm pregnant. So that was quite a shock because I didn't have the house, I didn't have my ducks lined up. Did I really want this baby? I proceeded to have an amazing baby girl. She was such a delight. Great pregnancy, great birth, water birth. Great sleeper, feeder, eater, well behaved, just a real delight, like an absolute delight. And we stupidly went, oh, this is so easy, this is so lovely, let's have another one. And then we had Imogen, who is equally delightful in a different way, but she was born into quite a different environment where my husband had just bought a business, or had bought a business a couple of years prior, and crap was starting to hit the fan. Remember the global financial crisis that we had? So we had a retail store, and yeah, it just started to get really messy. So Imogen was born into quite a different stressful environment. So I carried her while there's a lot of anxiety around our situation. Again, not having our own home, knowing that I'm going to have 2 kids under 2, huge lack of finances. So yeah, and from that, there's going to be more to my story, but I'm just kind of setting the tone there. God really spoke to me though, when I was pregnant with her. We never found out what we're having with our daughters, but I had the name Elena since I was 6 years old. So of course I was going to call my firstborn Elena Grace. It means beautiful child. And I had the name Imogen really press on my heart, and everyone was telling me I was having a boy. I carried differently, and I thought, oh yeah, a boy, don't know what we're going to call it. We couldn't decide on a name, but God had really pressed the name Imogen onto my heart. And I remember being in the post shop down at Botany Town Centre, and I was looking at cards, and the name Imogen came back to me, and it means in the image of her mother, or her mother's image, or mother's delight, and daughter. So in that, I went, okay, maybe I am having a little girl. And when she was born on Easter Sunday, she was meant to be born on Good Friday, but she came on Easter Sunday, I was like, yeah, she really was meant to be, but she's here to teach me a lesson. And I've absolutely learned a lot about myself and about God and about the parenting journey through her in particular. I've got 3 daughters, but her in particular, she's definitely the one that's taught me a lot of lessons.
And do you feel like that's because you see so much of yourself in her?
I see her Uncle Nui in her, actually. She absolutely adores her Uncle Nui. They've got a really strong bond. When you've had a child that has been just such a box ticker, and then you have a baby that cried a lot. Like, she cried a lot. She wasn't a very happy baby. She was chubby. She was beautiful. She slept really well. Thank you, Jesus. She slept so well at night. But during the day, I was like, what do I do with you? I'd try and feed her, and she'd arch, she'd cry, she'd arch, she'd cry. And my little 19-month-old is going, look, Mummy, moon. And I'm trying to engage with my 19-month-old. My husband's working 6 or 7 days a week at this point. So felt quite abandoned, not intentionally by him, but felt very, very alone. And I manifested my stress and my coping through looking well, having an immaculate home. So if I wasn't scrubbing my house clean and having a perfect home, I was out of the house going for drives, trying to get this flippin' baby to sleep and to stop crying. So through her first year, I worked out that she had silent reflux. Maybe it was colic, I don't know, but I was just in a bit of a shambles of headspace. So she cried a lot, and I felt that I lost a lot from my 19-month-old. And I'd been a mum to this baby, and she had all of me, and she was such a delight, and I loved being a mum. And now I've got this newborn that cried a lot, and a husband that wasn't available. In fact, Mark, and this isn't any negativity towards him at all, but he's always been in a position where he's been away from home. So even when Elena was a newborn, I was home alone because he was out doing sales calls, like up and down the country. So I didn't have the privilege, I guess, of having a husband that came home at night. I had lots of days on my own, lots of nights on my own with this baby. Then having our shop, which was my husband's dream. He had an opportunity to buy a skate shop. And being the dutiful wife, I was like, you know what, I've got my dream of having a mum. Your dream is to have a skate shop. Isn't God good? Isn't this lovely? But with the shop came some really awful experiences. A loss of money, mental health issues, enjoying my children. It affected our family. It had a really awful knock-on effect. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
Yeah, so talk us through, I forget how many years it was, but there came to a point where you just had to let the shop go and declare bankruptcy, basically. Yep. So just talk us through what that meant for both you and Mark. But yeah.
Yep, for sure. So when we had the shop, and it was like flogging a dead horse. When a global financial crisis hit, my husband was putting a lot of money in to try and keep it afloat. It then involved our parents, and I found that really hard, that my parents and my in-laws had to step in financially. Another thing that I really struggled with, it obviously had a knock-on effect with his brothers, because Nathan was working for us at that time. His older brother, Simon, he was giving a lot of sort of business advice. So it very much became a family affair. But it came to the point where there was no more money, and we couldn't go any further, and we had to call it a day. So I can't quite remember, because I've blocked out a lot of it. It was quite traumatic. I can't quite remember at what point he went into bankruptcy, but I believe it was when Imogen was about 2 or 3. And I remember he was really broken, and I was elated, because I'm seeing my husband go to work 7 days a week, and there's still no money, and there's no money, and there's no money. And I've got a husband that's not available. He's married to his shop. It's affecting our family. It took a huge toll on my mental health, because I'm meant to be a mum holding it all together and being supportive of my husband, but I felt guilty for not working, which consequently was the knock-on effect onto why I started my business, which I know Jess is going to bring up shortly. So going into bankruptcy, there's this stigma that, he went bankrupt. I was almost like celebrating it, because when you go into a bankruptcy, it's done. It's finished. So there's no more money being thrown at it, there's no more pressure, and there's no more stress, and it's done. And yes, there are consequences. What was really hard was you can't buy a house, and we're watching our younger siblings get into their first homes. My baby brother, he got into a lovely first home. My brother-in-law, our older brother-in-law, he's had multiple homes. So we found that really hard. Of course, we celebrated with our family the things that they achieved, but we found it really hard that we were like the poor brother and sister or the poor cousin. That was a real struggle. But with the bankruptcy, I remember my husband coming to bed one night, and he said, I think I might cry tonight. And I said, nope, He said, it'll be fine because you've now got a new job to step into because he got a new job within this week. God's amazing with his timing. And I said, and now we start again. We just rebuild and we just start again. So when you go into a bankruptcy, there are financial limitations where you can't put things on hire purchase, you can't buy a house, you can't travel. And that was really hard because during the season of him being fresh in bankruptcy, I had a cousin in Perth getting married and we had no money for me to fly over. And even if we did have the money, I couldn't justify flying over to my cousin's wedding knowing that we owed suppliers money and we owed my mother and father-in-law money and we owed my parents money. So that to this day really bothers me because I have a very small family. I've got 2 cousins and 1 brother. So my cousins came to New Zealand for my wedding. Of course I was going to go there for theirs. So to this day I really resent not being able to be at my cousin's wedding. But yeah, like the bankruptcy, that actually wasn't the hard part. The hard part was realising further down the track that I had postnatal anxiety. And here I was being perfect and all held together and routine mum and crock pot on and baking and involved with kindy and do, to the point that I had a physical breakdown because mentally I was so shattered.
So just talk about some of, like, in hindsight, because often when you're in it, you can't see it. But to look back at it now, what were some, like, for anyone listening, for the ladies listening, what would be some of the things that were obvious, clear signs that it was postnatal anxiety?
The obsession with being clean and having a perfect house, because you've got to understand, behind closed doors, it was all falling apart. Like, my husband's job, that he was flogging this dead horse of a business. So for me, I could provide and do well by having a nice, well-presented house and good baking and good cooking. And people would come in and go, oh my gosh, have you had a cleaner come in? And I was like, no, like, this is just what I do. Like, to have a perfect home, because it's almost saving face. It's actually quite a sad, unrealistic way of living. You're a young mum with 2 kids under 2. No one's got a perfect house. But that's where I was putting my energy because I couldn't help financially, I couldn't be present emotionally, but I could put my focus on my house. For some reason, that became my therapy, was having a clean house. Don't come to my house now. I'm a very healthy woman now. And I remember one particular day when the bankruptcy had happened, it's almost like my body went, oh, thank gosh for that, it's done. Because I remember being at Pack and Save and I had these pains in my shoulder and in my neck to the point that by the time I got home, I remember collapsing into the garage floor. We had an internal garage and I was dragging my groceries into the kitchen. And I remember phoning my friend at the time and I said, you need to come and take the baby because I can't lift her. So Imogen must have been like under 1 actually at this point. And she came and took her and took my toddler because she was friends with her little girl, and I went to bed. And I can't remember like the sequence of events, but I remember it was around New Year's. I remember missing New Year's Eve. I remember New Year's Day going to A&E and then on to Middlemore Hospital because I got put onto some anti-inflammatories for this pain in my neck and end of my shoulder, but it was actually stress. And I had a pain in my chest, so they're doing ECGs, but it was actually like a breakdown. Like I was having panic attacks. And being in bed and not like I could hear my kids playing, but I physically couldn't get out of bed. This is how mental I was. I remember phoning my doctor and saying to the lady, you need to put me onto Dr. Dorr. I need to speak to Dr. Dorr. So she put me through and I said to him, I've got a brain tumour. And he's like, who is this? I said, oh, it's Kerry Finlay. Oh, I'm dying. I think I'm dying. I've got a brain tumour. I can't move. Like I physically could not get out of bed. And I can't remember whether this was just for one weekend or over a course of weekends, but I remember my husband being home and it's almost like that was my time to collapse because the enormity of what we'd been through, the enormity of raising 2 kids under 2, the financial pressure, the shame, and knowing that our family was so invested. In fact, our family members knew more about our business than what I did, and I really struggled with that as well. It was just my husband protecting me. Just know that he wasn't keeping anything from me. So when I got up to have a shower, I got as far as shaving one leg, and I remember going, I can't breathe, I need to get back into bed, and I got back into bed wet. Like, who does that? That's not normal. So I do remember it was around New Year's because Imogen was 10 months. She got up to the batch. Our in-laws have got a batch up the coast, and our other sister-in-law was there, and she witnessed Imogen crawling for the first time because Mark had to take the children away from me. Like, I had to go and stay with my parents for a week. I had no iron. I was depleted in absolutely everything. All I could do was sleep. I never napped when I had babies. It's another dumb thing. When I had my first baby, I never had a day nap. I just was the perfect mother. Cook, bake, clean, socialise, coffee group. And it all came to a huge, huge head with the stress of the business. And I think that was all those years of sleep just hitting me. That's what I think it was. So I remember Imogen crawling for the first time with my sister-in-law, Karen. I remember thinking, why wasn't I present? So looking back now, I can just see a huge loss where I wasn't present for things. I was physically there, but my mind was present elsewhere with the burden of the stress and the financial anxiety that was over our family. So I can look back now, and even yesterday I was hanging my washing and I was talking to Jess and I said to her, I was thinking about today, and I actually got quite emotional because I'm addressing stuff now I've never publicly shared. I've not even spoken to Mark about. Like, I'm actually reliving stuff and going, wow, I really was in such a bad way. So coming to the postnatal anxiety side of things, at that point I didn't realise it was postnatal anxiety until I went to a doctor. And I'm like, look, I think I've got a brain tumour. There's something wrong with my heart. I don't know. I think I'm dying. And so we went through a few things, and she said, no, what I think is actually anxiety that you've probably carried for a really long time. And as women, we're actually quite phenomenal creatures because we have got such a huge capacity to carry burden. We literally carry the weight of our world on our shoulders. So I take my hat off to anybody that is going through stress or anxiety or feeling postnatal depression. It's very, very normal. I think we've all experienced it in some way or to some kind of spectrum. I got onto citalopram, which is a happy pill, and even that in itself, I felt that there was a stigma to taking medication for mental health issues. If you've got mental health issues in your family, and even we've had that in our families in some kind of way, and there's always kind of this kind of, they're a bit special, it's a bit of a thing. And I remember texting Jess and saying, yes, I'm on the happy pills, bring it on, not so perfect now. And I almost kind of mocked it, but I was so happy. I was so happy that I was on citalopram. And it really did level me. Another thing I just want to go back and address, another funny behaviour that I realised, I became really good at lying, like amazing liar. I'm a really good salesperson. Little things, like my coffee group, who are all perfect and had houses and husbands who
also
are like...
you thought.
Oh, so I thought, yeah. Coffee group, most of them were older, they had careers, they had houses, they travelled the world, everything was great. And I found that there was times where I just couldn't go to coffee group, and that was like my lifesaver. Your coffee group's your world when you've had a baby because you're all in it, together. And it started off like little things, like the anxiety of being around them and the shame of being around them and having to play happy mum and happy Kerry, because I am quite a positive person, and people do call me Counsellor Kerry. And when I can't offer that to people, it's like, well, who am I? Because I'm not looking after myself. I can barely look after my children. What value can I bring to this group? So I got really good at lying, like, oh, Elena's got a fever, or oh, Imogen had a bad night last night, so we're just going to stay in. So I got actually quite obsessed with having control over my environment. Even recently, I remember my mother-in-law just bringing up, like back in the day, would be up at the batch for 2 or 3 days, and I'd get into this flap and have to come home. And I remember her saying, oh, it was just so funny, you'd be having such a good time, and then all of a sudden you just want to go, and it was just so weird. And I remember being quite offended, but then I looked back and went, actually, that was my anxiety kicking in. Like, there's only so much of being outside of my environment I could handle. I had to get back home. I had to get back home. I'm in control. I can clean. I've got control over my space. Being outside of my space for too long brought me huge anxiety, not because I was worried about safety issues for my children, and certainly not because I wasn't having a good time, but it was just I had to have control over my environment, and especially if I'm in an environment that's been run by another person, it's their home or their batch, or it's their routine. That really messed with me because I've got my routine and I've got my space, and my safe space was my home. So I got very, very good at lying, and to the point that I found it really hard to engage with my coffee group. I'd hide stuff from them, so they didn't even know really what I was going through. How I got through it, though, was being really involved with my kindy, and opening up to a couple of people and being available to other people for their issues. I almost relished other people's issues because I wanted to know that I wasn't the only one. You know, oh, your marriage is falling apart. Oh, so what's going on? So I got really invested in other people's issues as a distraction from my own. But another thing with postnatal anxiety is the noise. Like, there was a physical noise in my head. And I remember my dad saying, oh, just buck up your ideas and take the girls to the park next door. Like, we lived next door to an amazing park. The idea of walking up the driveway and around the corner and throwing my kids onto a swing and playing Happy Families made me feel ill because I wasn't going to be emotionally present in that moment. I'd rather stay at home and clean and put them in front of SpongeBob or Blue's Clues or whatever it was that was playing back in the day. So yeah, lots of funny behaviours, but it's a coping mechanism. So hopefully it's answered some of the questions. You're probably going, oh my gosh, you're such a cock case.
Not at all. If anything,
I've never lied to you, by the way, just so you know.
Okay. No, if anything, I'm sitting here thinking, how to see that in someone else and how to support them, because I was blind to it. But you did have a really nice clean house.
Yeah, I was really good at putting on everything's fine, everything's good, but inside, like, I had noise in my head, and no, it wasn't fine. Yeah.
So you definitely need those people that you can share with and who know the real you, I suppose. Because my next question is just around getting yourself out of that. And part of getting out of the bankruptcy and out of postnatal anxiety was for you, a big thing was to have your own income or feel like you're contributing to the family. And so you found a really cool way to do that.
Hugely. Okay, so I've come from a very traditional family. My mum to this day has not worked for 38 years, and mums don't work. Okay, mums stay home. Okay, this is kind of like the narrative I kind of grew up with, very middle class. The husband did their office job and the mummies stayed at home. But I very quickly realised and I'm really grateful, like, we have got such a rock solid marriage, and it is purely down to having an amazing family around us and God. Because despite us losing everything, and even to this day, I can't even tell you whether buying the shop was God's will or not. We didn't really pray about it. It just presented itself, and it was my husband's dream. So even if it wasn't God's will, the amazing thing is we went off on this tangent, and God somehow provided and wove in an amazing story out of that, even if it wasn't part of his original plan. So I don't know. I can't answer that. However, I just want to talk about two amazing things that happened in this moment that made me go, wow, God has so got his hand on this. One morning I woke up and I was like, I want a pumpkin. I want to make pumpkin soup. I want to make pumpkin muffins. I want to make pumpkin frittata. I just had this idea that I wanted a pumpkin, but money was really, really tight. Like, it was either $20 petrol in the car or $20 for mints for the week. Like, it was bad. I was shopping with a shopping basket, not a shopping trolley, and not many friends know that to this day, that's how we were living. I dropped my girls at kindy. I came home. What was on my front doorstep? The biggest pumpkin I have ever seen in my entire life. I did not mention to a soul that I wanted a pumpkin. But that morning, I'm making breakfast. I'm thinking, I'm going to come home and go to the shops and get a pumpkin and just make all the stuff for my kids and my husband and freeze it. And there was this big-as pumpkin on my front doorstep, to the point I had to give half of it to my neighbour because I couldn't fit it in my veggie drawer in the fridge.
Couldn't make enough frittata.
Could not make enough frittata. I'm like, so many things you can make out of a pumpkin. So that was amazing. Another amazing story, came home. To this day, I don't know who did this, but there was like $100 sitting in an envelope on our front doorstep. I don't know who did that. When my husband, and Nui will probably remember this so much better because he was very present in this moment during this time, but when our shop closed, almost to the week, my husband was offered a new job. So that was like, thank you, God. And it literally walked into his shop. The rep for Adidas Eyewear was leaving his job. Does Mark know anyone that wants a job? Mark's like, me. He started the following week. So we're able to wind up our business. He started his new job, a salary, a company car, home on weekends. That was like a huge, huge blessing. Just prior to that, though, when Imogen was 2, I went and trained to be an image consultant because I've come from the fashion and beauty industry, and I wanted to be able to provide financially. I needed something for me and my mental health. I needed something where I could impart in people's lives because that was my distraction. That was my therapy, being therapy to someone else. So I was able to train to be an image consultant, and I feel really blessed and quite fortunate that we have been able to get by where my business has been able to fit around the demands of my children and also around Mark's work, because again, he was in another role where he wasn't in a shop, but he's then away on the road. So I've done a lot of my parenting on my own, and now we're in a situation where we had a bizarre year last year, but we're in a situation now where he's home every night and he's home on weekends because he's gone into plumbing, which is a huge new thing, but he's very, very available. And even my girls, my little one, Imogen, said to me the other day, she said, Mum, you don't even yell like you used to. You're not all like stressy and manic. Like you're a way better mother. And part of me broke, but a part of me was so happy because God really has brought this thing around. And I definitely feel way calmer and able to parent the girls better, and that I can share that burden of the parenting of the children. It's not all on me, and I did it really tough. I think everyone does it tough, solo parents. I don't know how you do it, but I certainly felt like a solo parent in this moment because my husband was married to his business, to his shop, not intentionally, but he was literally trying to put food on the table. Then in his sales roles, he was away from his family to get money to pay for the family he didn't see. So him losing his job last January, pre-COVID, sounds really nightmarish. He had no payout either. He went into COVID with no job, so got no wage subsidy. So we were back to food parcels again. That's a whole other story. God's definitely had his hand in it all along. So my whole point is that we had no choice but to solely rely on God. If we did not have God, our marriage would have totally disintegrated because we didn't have that glue holding us together. And I remember speaking to my mother-in-law on the phone, standing in Imogen's room when the bankruptcy was quite fresh, and she was like, I'm just checking up on you, how are you doing? And I cried, and I just said, oh, look, I just love him so much. I want you to know that I'm just so proud of him. Like, this bankruptcy doesn't change how I see him. I know it changed how he saw himself. And I think even for some family members, it affected them, you know, how they saw him. But for me as his wife, like, we've been married 17 years next weekend. And I'm madly in love with him. He's my best friend, and I've got a major crush on him, and he's been an incredible provider. Like, everything he's done has been for me and my girls, so he is very special.
Tear.
Oh, I don't cry, I'm tough.
Cool. I think we'll probably leave it there.
Cool.
But if you guys want to talk more with Kerry about what she does now with her image consultancy and styling, I get the pleasure of going shopping with her for free. And we have lots of fun. And yeah, she does colours and tells you what looks good on you and your body shape. And yeah, I mean, you spend most weekdays now just hanging out at Botany Mall. We're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for sharing and being vulnerable.